This is a presentation addressing students in the public schools and dress code. One thing that's very important to consider is that if a school is too vague with its school dress code policy, it's going to be difficult to uphold any ruling in a court. So policy needs to be very clearly defined and needs to be reasonable in its policy. Otherwise, the courts are going to require them to be able to demonstrate that or to be able to demonstrate their guidelines. When defining guidelines, there are some important things to consider. One is that when there's evidence of material or substantial disruption to the educational process, that is something that needs to be considered in the dress code. Another important thing to consider is if the dress code has anything to do with a violation of health and safety standards, or when unusual attention is drawn to a student's anatomy. The following restrictions are those that are upheld by courts. School regulations that are necessary to protect the safety of students. An example would be long hair or jewelry that's worn around safety equipment. School regulations that are necessary to protect the health of the students. An example would be if a student has lice in their hair or they have unsanitary conditions. Another restriction that is upheld by the courts is rules that would prohibit dress that it does not meet the standards of the community. An example would be dressing in a way that calls an unusual attention to oneself. And a final restriction that is upheld by courts is that dress that results in material and substantial disruption to orderly administration of the school. And that may be prohibited. Something that's an example of that would be vulgar or lewd or racial language or clothing. Schools are obligated to provide reasonable rules and regulations necessary to address health and safety concerns of students if and when it comes to the dress code. Other examples of health and safety issues would be that schools regulating hair length and vocational or shop classes, as mentioned earlier, or laboratories that would pose a threat to their safety. Again, as I mentioned earlier, jewelry that would pose a potential threat in shop, an activity-oriented or physical education class may be limited. Other important specifications to consider in a school dress code policy would be clearly defining slogans on t-shirts or caps that are in direct conflict with the school's mission. Vulgar, lewd, or obscene gestures should be regulated. Also, expressions that would mock others based on their race, gender, color, religion, sexual orientation, national origin may be regulated. So to sum up guidelines for dress code policy for schools, local school dress codes should be approved by the Board of Education Policies. Dress codes will be supported by courts only when they can be deemed reasonable. And only restrictions based on health, safety, and order will pass court scrutiny. And finally, appearance that doesn't conform to rudiments of decency may be regulated, and prohibited dress includes expressions that mock others based on race, gender, color, religion, language, sexual orientation, or national origin may be regulated. So when a school is considering their dress code policy, they need to be very specific and include these specific things if they want to be able to uphold these policies in their school.